This idea has been gaining traction, especially among those who see technological advancements and political shifts as a preparation for an unprecedented level of control. The Bible gives us hints about a global system, a universal mark that everyone would be forced to adopt to survive in a highly controlled society. Suddenly, what once seemed like a religious concept starts to sound like a real and urgent warning. Imagine the situation of a father who, upon arriving at work, is informed that he won't receive his paycheck unless he has this mark. This scene may sound absurd, but it illustrates well the pressure that many could face in a scenario of enforced acceptance of this mark. In this context, a person would have no choice but to give in. It's as if the system were programmed to demand complete loyalty to this idea. And this is not an easy choice. It's a soul-wrenching decision because it implies renouncing a fundamental freedom. Seen this way, it's clear that what appears to be a choice is actually a disguised imposition. Now imagine a mother who, after giving birth, discovers that she needs the mark to buy milk for her baby. The pressure on the individual strikes at what they love most. This type of situation could push anyone to the brink, which is exactly what makes the concept so terrifying. No one likes to think they could be forced to choose between their beliefs and the survival of their loved ones. With the mark, basic needs become strategic targets of control: food, health, transportation, all turning into currency for exchange. The idea is to strip the individual of even the choice of how and where to live. These scenarios are harsh to imagine, but they serve to show how everyday life would become a series of concessions. Every action, every purchase or trip would depend on this mark, imposing a forced adaptation to a new reality. And this wouldn't be for a select few. Everyone, without exception, would be within the same system, bound by the same rules. It's a silent pressure, but so pervasive that it becomes almost impossible to resist. And when acceptance starts to seem inevitable, the consequences for those who decide to reject it are anything but light. The basis of this concept isn't random. It's rooted in a specific biblical vision. In Revelation 13:16-17, we see that the requirement of the mark is imposed on everyone: rich, poor, free, and slave. It's not a differentiation by class or status. It's absolute control. This passage illustrates a reality where individual freedoms are suppressed in the name of a greater order. And this is no simple choice. Here, loyalty to the system symbolizes an oath of allegiance, where anyone who doesn't comply is, by default, out of the game. Imagine that freedom of movement, of buying and selling, is granted only to those who possess this mark. This vision offers a deep reflection on the role of faith and resistance. When we think of loyalty to the Antichrist as a final test of faith, we realize the issue goes far beyond accepting or rejecting the mark. It's like a watershed moment where each person's convictions will be tested in extreme situations. The oath once made to kings and rulers now becomes obedience to a symbolic figure of absolute power. For those who wish to remain faithful to personal values and beliefs, this imposition may become a true dilemma. But what about the implications of this oath? By committing to this mark, the individual aligns with an authority that demands everything, down to the last trace of autonomy. It's a pact that symbolizes more than a simple choice of sides. It's the total subordination of whoever accepts it. And in this suppression of freedom, we see how this prophetic scenario tries to show the nuances of complete control. The biblical text leaves no gaps. Whoever adheres to the mark is, in some way, renouncing something greater. And the consequences of that renunciation, well, that's another matter altogether. The issue of loyalty to the Antichrist involves a powerful psychological game. It's not just about external submission, but a commitment of loyalty that impacts the very essence of the individual. Those who decide to reject this loyalty will pay a high price, as they will forego all social benefits and rights. The person is isolated from the economic system, with no access to goods and services. Imagine living in a world where everything depends on this mark, and by refusing, it's like choosing to live on the margins of society. And all this for choosing to remain faithful to one's beliefs. However, the consequences aren't limited to the material realm. According to prophecy, refusing the mark is also a declaration of spiritual resistance, placing the refuser in an extremely vulnerable position. Persecution is almost certain, and the biblical scenario makes it clear that the cost of remaining faithful will be high. This reflects in practical, day-to-day issues, like the difficulty in obtaining simple food. It's a constant, exhausting pressure where the price of loyalty to faith is paid with the sacrifice of a life in isolation, and, for many, without hope. In this context, loyalty to the Antichrist is a demand that goes beyond the surface and implies total surrender. Those who accept the mark aren't just accepting a symbol, they're submitting to a new belief system, almost like an unbreakable pact. This choice places the individual's life on an irreversible path, where each act and decision reinforces their commitment to an absolute power. And it's here that the depth of this loyalty is revealed. Accepting the mark is more than just adherence, it's a declaration of belonging, and each choice from then on only makes this alliance harder to break. The very idea of the mark raises many questions and speculations. Some say it could be something physical, like a chip implanted under the skin, something that could easily be tracked and controlled. Imagine a small device that stores all a person's information and transactions, practically a digital identity. It doesn't seem so far from our current reality, with advances in technology and the growing digitalization of payment systems. The mark would then become a way to ensure that everyone is under the control of this new order. These speculations go further, suggesting that, with such a system, the world economy would become completely centralized and universal. All transactions would be monitored, and the simple act of buying bread or paying a bill would be within reach of the authorities. With a simple scan, it would be possible to know where a person has been, what they bought, and even predict their consumption behaviors. It sounds like a science fiction movie, but it's a hypothesis that draws ever closer to reality, where we already see the use of technologies like RFID and artificial intelligence systems in various areas. What's most intriguing is that this control wouldn't only be economic, but also social and spiritual. The mark in this sense would be a symbol of submission to a supreme authority, a kind of digital pact with the Antichrist system. Anyone who didn't accept the mark would be prevented from participating in social life, excluded from all essential activities. It's a vision that stirs the imagination because it touches on our freedom of choice. And the more we think about the possibilities, the more we understand that the mark wouldn't be just an object of control, but a true seal of loyalty. Persecution of Christians is a crucial point in this scenario, and the biblical predictions clearly show that the lives of believers will be marked by extreme sacrifices. Imagine a world where faith is not just devalued, but actively hunted, forcing the faithful to make drastic decisions to preserve their beliefs. Many will be forced to choose between their faith and survival, and this constant pressure will make each act of resistance a Herculean challenge. It's as if every day it would be necessary to reaffirm loyalty amid circumstances that try to strip away all hope. The scriptures highlight that persecution won't be an isolated act, but rather a global movement. This means there won't be a safe place for those who keep their faith intact. The Bible even speaks of martyrdom, evoking an image of ancient times where sacrifice for what one believes in was absolute. It's not just a matter of survival, but of unwavering conviction. In this scenario, Christians would face profound dilemmas, seeing their families in danger or being forced to live in hiding. It's a dark portrait, but one that seeks to bring to light the extent of commitment for those who decide not to give in. Persecution, above all, will test each individual's resilience and their ability to remain faithful amidst it all. Constantly on the run, resisting the pressure to abandon faith, anyone could become a symbol of courage and resistance. This strength comes from the understanding that, even amidst a society that rejects its values, faith remains unshakable. This is the true test that prophecy brings, a moment where each person's essence will be revealed, and where those who stand firm will find, in the end, a reward that transcends this world. The prophecy of the end times presents a powerful vision of the Antichrist's rise and the impact of this dominion on human life. He is described as an irresistible authority figure, someone who will command a new world order with charisma and absolute control. For many, he will emerge as a savior, a charismatic leader offering answers in a time of crisis. But his intentions are otherwise. The Bible warns that behind this appearance lies the true face of opposition to good, and it's here that the great challenge begins. How can one discern the false Messiah when he seems like the solution? During his reign, the world will face a period of darkness, marked by oppression and persecution. The prophecy speaks of the Battle of Armageddon, a final confrontation that will be the peak of the struggle between good and evil. Imagine a battle where the fate of the world is at stake, involving spiritual and human forces in an epic showdown. This moment is not only a physical battle, but also symbolic, representing the ultimate clash between those who chose to follow the Antichrist and those who remained faithful to their values and beliefs. However, hope remains for those who believe in divine intervention. At the end of this tribulation, the prophecy states that Jesus Christ will return, bringing with him a definitive victory over evil. His arrival represents the restoration of justice, a twist that will end the Antichrist's reign and establish a new era of peace. This moment is anticipated as the culmination of faith, a promise that the sacrifice and perseverance of the faithful were not in vain. The triumphant return of Christ is, at last, the ending that completes the story, a guarantee that despite all the suffering, justice will prevail. And here, this epic journey reaches its climax.